Does it build more trust with your partner if you wait to have sex until you get married?
Well, I never waited. So, I mean, if you really click with somebody, I mean, most women in the West here, by second or third date, they're going to sleep with you. So, if there's a connection and you click, it's going to be on right away. I mean, I've done both where it's like we hook up the first night and we may date a couple years. And I've also done it where I've made the girl wait for a few weeks or a month or so before doing the deed. In either way, if you're applying what's in the book, they still end up at the same destination. So it's really up to you and how you feel about it. But I know there's a lot of people that watch me that are super religious. They're like, no sex until marriage. You know, we can kiss. No fornication, Corey. We don't do any of that. I was like, hey, if you want to do that, great. But if you're, because I've seen where there's problems, you have a value conflict with if you're an ultra religious dude and then you're trying to date a girl that's like, slept with 50 guys and, you want to date her for 2 or 3 years with no sex, it's like, she's going to most women I don't think are going to be down for that unless they're super into you and you're super amazing. But, different strokes for different folks. I say hang out, have fun, hook up. And, for the religious guys, the hookup part happens on your wedding night. It's up to you. Obviously, a lot of my clients are Muslim too, so, and a lot of them are like, no sex till marriage, no hanky-panky.
Have you always thought about that? Like thought that it was like okay, or when you were younger, did you ever have that thought? Because like a lot of women, like when you're young, you're like, oh, I'm gonna wait till I get married to find the perfect person to take my flower. But like, did you ever like think of that in your head as you were like a young man?
Well, I mean, I went to a Catholic high school, and my mother really was the one that had us going to church and stuff like that, and I learned early on that it's like even the Catholic school girls, it's like they were the biggest whores out of all of them. And even because it's like typically people often that get sexually repressed are just kind of freaks behind the scenes. And I mean, I see a lot of the guys on the internet, especially the red pill guys, they get upset about women and sleeping around, and it's like, I don't know. It's like in the when I was growing up, 70s and the 80s, the pill was there. It's typically you should practice safe sex. Most of the time, honestly, people didn't, and all relationships came from casual hooking up. And some girls slept with way more dudes, and some girls might date 2 or 3 guys in between boyfriends, and they might be with the boyfriends 3 or 4 or 5 years or whatever, and then by mid-20s, late 30s, they're all married. And so they may have easily slept with 20 dudes over the course of, from the time they would lose their virginity, typically 15, 16 years old, their first boyfriend in high school or whatever. So thinking that, because like the way they talk it's something new that women are sleeping around, and they've always been sleeping around. I mean, if you look back to the 60s and the fact that, or even the 30s and the 40s, it's just like when the pill came along, it made it really easy to have sex without worrying about getting pregnant. Because that was a big thing before that, is how do you avoid a pregnancy other than with a condom? And sometimes condoms break or they have little holes in them and you slip them past the goalie. It's, my old business partner who's, passed away about 5 years ago, his wife, she got, she was sleeping with her high school boyfriend. I think she was 16, and she got knocked up. And so this was in the late 60s, early 1970s. And it was, her parents were religious, so they sent her away to like a convent to basically have the child, so nobody would see, she wouldn't go to high school with a big, belly because she was pregnant or whatever. It's like back then they would like send you away. She had the child and then gave it up for adoption. And, in later years, she reconnected and is still in contact with him, because to her it was her son. She felt horrible about giving him up, and she wanted to keep him, but her parents were like, no, you're giving the baby up. You're a child yourself. You shouldn't be raising a kid. And so a nice couple that, couldn't have kids adopted him. So, like, these things aren't new. Women have sex. I mean, it's just easy for women to have sex, especially when they're pretty. They're just constant dudes throwing their dicks at them. It's kind of like an all-you-can-eat buffet. The ladies have the choice, especially when they're younger, because they get approached. The prettier they are, the more social they are. They're always out. I mean, I'm not telling you girls anything you don't know. I mean, you're young and beautiful, so you get bombarded constantly. And like I said, the guys that make the biggest deal out of it and cry about it and complain about modern women are the dudes that aren't getting any pussy. And so it's like I see all this hyperventilation in the red pill community. It's like, I mean, really, character is destiny. When we were in high school, there were girls that were sleeping around with a lot of dudes and came from messed up families, and they were hot and everything, but everybody knew that that's a girl you hook up with. You're not going to marry her or, run off and live happily ever after. It's like there's some girls that are out there and they're kinky and they're great for hooking up and one night stands and stuff like that. And there's other women that are more family oriented and are more are more suitable for long term dating. And I see a lot of the guys in that red pill community just don't. You can tell a lot of them have gotten burned. They got burned. It's single moms are all the problem. And it's like, no, you suck at judging people's character, and then you get involved with somebody thinking you're going to be a white knight and change her, and she doesn't change. And then when she burns you the same way she burned everybody else before that, you're like, it's all modern women suck. It's, you got to be smart. You got to try before you buy. Don't be in such a rush to put a ring on the finger. And especially, the dudes that live in blue states where the laws are just like, you have no leverage. It's the state just basically takes their arm and shoves it right up your poop chute and basically takes control of the man and animates him and just whatever the woman wants it's basically legally what they do. So it's like, I say it's what worked well in business, because kind of a marriage is like a business, is that what is the divorce always over? It's arguing about money and assets and who's going to, raise the kids or get time and custody and stuff like that. And it's just, especially some of the states that you have, like they're the blue states, the laws are so one-sided and it's not worth it. You'd just be better to get married civilly and have a business agreement for any property that you buy together or businesses that you start together. When you go into business together with business partners, typically smart people, smart entrepreneurs, have what's called a partnership agreement. And in the partnership agreement, say you have 3 business partners like I used to, is that each partner has a set amount of duties that they have to bring to the partnership in order for the partnership and the business, ultimately what you're building together, to flourish. And if one person falls down or doesn't do it, then, because the smart, prudent thing to do is, okay, well, what if you get incapacitated? Or what if we do this for 10 years and make a lot of money and you decide, I want to, move to the island somewhere and shave my head and my ass and my legs and meditate all day, or sun my balls or sun my butthole or whatever. You want to do something weird? It's like, hey, whatever. But also, what happens if you fall down and say that, because personalities conflict, what if you just can't work together? How do you dissolve? How does each person walk away? And you figure all these things out ahead of time, kind of like in a way that a prenuptial is, but it's a partnership agreement. If you have children, what happens if you decide not to stay together? What are your values? Who's going to do what? You can spell everything out and then not go through divorce courts and all that nasty stuff, because statistically, you're looking at 50-60% chance that the marriage is not going to last the rest of your life and you're going to be getting divorced, or your partnership is going to dissolve. And so from that perspective, if you love one another, you should be able to work that out ahead of time. And if you can't work something out like that, then just imagine getting married to that person, because a lot of guys do that because, like, the woman, they're going to involve a state and she doesn't want to sign a prenup. And then the guy caves, and he later just gets crushed financially in divorce court. So have a business agreement ahead of time and don't involve the state in a marriage. And you can wear your rings and have your ceremony and involve, you can have your religious ceremonies, but it just doesn't have the weight of the state behind that kind of a legal document, because it's too much downside risk. And so if you look at it from like a business perspective of how the assets and the money and the income is going to be divvied up if it doesn't work out, and who's going to take care of the kids. If you want her to be a stay-at-home mom and say it doesn't work out for whatever reason, then ideally you'd want her to still be a stay-at-home mom. Why, at least while the kids are young, and at some point the kids get old enough they go to school and stuff, then the mom goes back to work. And the goal should be to raise great humans. Whether you stay together or not shouldn't matter. The goal is to make sure your sons and daughters turn out to be great human beings, that when you're old and your tits are banging your knees, or your balls are dragging out of the crown and you're a guy, you can say, my son's doing amazing, or I'm so proud of my daughter or daughters or whatever, and have human beings that make the world a better place. That should be the goal, whether you stay together or not. And when you marriage from a legal perspective and the repercussions is just way more downside risk than it's worth. And men need to understand that when you're dealing with a woman in divorce, even if you're amicable, if she's hurt, especially if you file or she files for whatever reason, she's not happy, it's like if there's money on the table that can be had, her divorce attorney and your divorce attorney are like, they want to keep the meter running. And it's just, from a legal perspective, it's just too much downside risk to get involved that way. So it'd be much easier when you guys have nothing together, to figure out, okay, if we get together and I build a business, or I make this money, or I have this retirement, or you build a career and you make this, how do we split all that up? How do we disengage? Those kinds of things. And so with your personal retirement and stuff like that, ideally, if you think about it, if you're raising humans, you want your kids, whether your sons or daughters, you want them to be self-reliant. If you and your significant other get hit by a bus, ideally you would want your child to be able to go out and get a job and pay rent and cook and clean and be able to interact with the world in a way that they can get by. It'd be a tragic loss that you're gone, but in a way that they can get by without you. And so the same thing should apply when it comes to your significant other. You got to plan for every and all eventuality. Like in the business partnership, you have what's called key man insurance. And what key man insurance is what happens if one of the business partners, say you got 3 business partners, and each one of them has a policy. What if one of them gets hit by a bus, or kidnapped by aliens, or they die, or whatever, or they get physically incapacitated where they can't work? That's that partner's contribution may be essential. And so that is a huge financial impact to the company if one of the partners, or say you got 3 partners and 2 of them die in a plane crash or something like that, or a car accident, then it's just you. And your other 2 partners did things that you couldn't do. It's like they have insurance policies that pay that out. So you can get life insurance policies for something like, stuff like that. And so it's much better and cleaner to do that and do like a civil type of, and obviously you got to follow whatever laws apply in your state or your country, but to do something civilly where you treat it like a business, because in essence what it is. Are you going to have a trust? Because in a trust, if you have significant assets, it's what the wealthy people do, is the family trust, or whatever kind of trust they form, owns all the assets. That means every person that benefits from the money or the finances or whatever works for the trust as an employee. And so they get a company car, they get a house to live. And so that's why when rich people get sued, it's like, they're taking a meager salary. And so all the stuff that they have, they don't own it. The trust owns it. And, that's the way you protect your assets. That's why the elite and the ultra wealthy just, they pass this big mass on to future generations. And so from a legal perspective as well, your wife, if you become rich and successful and she's raising your kids, wouldn't you want her to be able to do well also, so she can continue to be a great mother? Because again, the goal is to make sure the kids are awesome. And like I said, you get the state involved, and the state takes the custody, and you got money, you got child support, and then you're kind of at the mercy of the court. And they're going to make a deal that's typically very unfair for the guy, especially in the blue states. So it's that kind of, to me, it's not worth it. and it's not necessary. Why buy the cow when you can get the milk for free?
Wouldn't that be part of your vetting process, is to find somebody that you're not planning to get divorced to?
Yeah, but the last thing anybody is thinking
It's
on the day
divorce.
they're getting married is that it's going to end in divorce. And so you have a 50 to 60% chance that it's not going to work out. And so if you're in a blue state, there's a 50% chance you're going to lose everything. You can be married 1 year. It's like, I mean, it's amazing. A guy can build a company of 100 million and then be married for a year or two, not even have any kids, and it's giving tens of millions of dollars to somebody that was not even there when you did all that stuff. And it's like, that's it's a nice emotional ideal that you're going to ride off into the sunset together and live and die in your deathbed seconds apart, like some Disney movie. But in real life, it's not like that. So plan accordingly. Always know your downside risk. I learned that in my early 20s. This guy was a multi-millionaire. He was very successful flipping foreclosure properties and taking old apartment buildings down, especially South Beach in the early 90s when that whole area got revitalized and took off. And I learned a lot from him. One of the first things he taught me was, he says, always know your downside risk. And it always stuck with me. And, especially after going through a divorce, after being only married for a year, and it was unpleasant. It took several years to get out of it legally. And it's just, I had a business partnership, and when our business partnership dissolved, it's like, yeah, there was bad feelings, on all sides towards each other, but it was so easy to split things up. And so, it was easy for us to split up and all go do our own thing. And it was, to one of my partner Paul's credit, the way we had structured the company also was really great. Myself, my other partner, were not, open. We wanted to just throw everything in, and he convinced us that it was just, you got paid based on what you brought in, your performance. And for our type of business, especially commission-based, loans, real estate, and, properties we flipped and stuff like that, that was smart on his part. And, because he had other business partnerships that did not end very amicably. And so we had agreed to everything up front, and, a deal was a deal. And so it made it easy when we had to dissolve that deal. It was much easier to get out of my business partnership after a decade in business and tens of millions of dollars at stake than it was to get married and then later divorced after only a year of marriage. We had a house to dispose of. There was the court system, and the new boyfriend that she had started interfering because he was jealous and insecure that she was going to try to come back, or I was going to try to come back. And so he kind of threw gasoline in the fire and to keep the conflict going. And I eventually had to, reach out to her father and tell him what was the shenanigans that her attorney was pulling, because he was trying to use up all the retainer. And so this dude's just making up bullshit and sending letters to my attorney, and charging a couple $100s to write a letter to the money that she had given in retainer. And then, of course, my attorney's going to respond, and he's going to charge me a couple $100 to write back. And it's like going back and forth. And, everything goes to the mail. And so it's several days. And then just the thing it's like month after month, just letters back and forth, a couple $1,000s here. It's like, we had everything agreed to up front. And then this guy, between the boyfriend and her attorney, trying to prevent from having to refund any of her giant retainers she gave him, then it would have been so much easier if we had all that nice partnership agreement. So that's the best way to go. And like I said, that was a great lesson that my former business partner, that he had learned in other failed partnerships that he had, that were nasty when things split up, that it made things really great. It's a smart way to do it.